Hi, everybody, and welcome back to episode 10 of the Safari Shots podcast, the final one for this season. And today we are going to be talking about going to photograph jaguars in the Pantanal. But before we get on to that, if you want to know who won the tiny little trophy for the best photograph taken at Mashatu between me and Lance, stick around until the end of this episode. And we'll also talk a little bit more about what you can expect for season 2. But as always, I am joined today by my co-host, Lance van der Vyver. How are you doing, Lance?
Bon dia. Very well, thanks. Yourself?
It's good to see you, man. As always, we've both been missing each other as I'm traveling to Zimbabwe, you're traveling to Brazil, I'm traveling to Mashatu, you're traveling to Kambaku. So it's good to see your face again, man.
It feels like it's been forever, which it kind of has.
Listen, Lance, I must say I watched your Panthera Photo Safaris trip report to the Pantanal of the trip that you recently did there. Actually, I watched it yesterday, and I must say I am very, very jealous. I also see those beautiful photographs behind you. I know that you just came back from it, but before we talk about anything else, am I right in saying that you're going back again in 2025?
Yes, absolutely. So we're actually going back in 2025, and we've already booked 2026 as well.
My goodness.
25 and 26 dates are on our website.
Well, we'll make sure to link to that website in the video description. If you guys are interested and you like what you see in this episode, go and check that out. And remember, guys, we're also on Spotify. So for those of you that's watching now on YouTube and you want to listen to this at a later stage, remember that we're on Spotify as well. Lon, so let's talk about the trip that you did this year. Just remind us quickly, when did you go and for how long were you there?
So we went in August. So the first date was the 1st of August. And we ran 2 trips back to back. So both trips were 11 days each. So I was there for a total of about 23, 24 days with the overlaps. But guest-wise, we were there for 22 days, which was awesome.
And without giving away too much, why did you decide to travel in August specifically as opposed to earlier or later in the year?
So August is a really, really nice month. It's peak season in Brazil is anywhere from sort of June to September, end of September. You don't travel there over their rainy season, which is basically end of November all the way to about March, April, because it's simply in flood. So anywhere in those June to September are good, but August just kind of fell into place this year. It was when we were available, they had space, and it's a good time. So next year we're actually not going in August, but it's just as good.
Okay, fantastic. And before we get all to all the good stuff, all the sightings and the camera gear and the bird life, let's just talk a little bit about logistics, because I know for a lot of people, when you travel to these, let's call them exotic destinations like tigers in India or jaguars in the Pantanal, people are a little bit worried about how you get there. So just briefly explain to us, let's say from South Africa, you travel typically from Hoedspruit via Johannesburg. What would be your typical way of getting to the river in the Pantanal?
So it's actually surprisingly easy. I don't find the traveling part difficult in Brazil. It's more the language part, but I'm sure we'll come back to that at some point. But so from South Africa, once you've got yourself to Johannesburg, which is an extra step for me, you fly directly to Sao Paulo. And then Sao Paulo, you're now in Brazil. My timing with my flights from South Africa, I need to overnight. And then the next day we fly and we all meet as a group in a little town called Cuiabá. That's where we meet. That's where we have our first little planning session. We overnight in a hotel there. And then the next day we're on the road, ready to go.
Talk a little bit about that road. That's that what do you call it? Not Hotel Transylvania.
Trans-Pantanera. I always say it wrong, but yeah, Trans-Pantanera Highway. And it's about 277 kilometers long, and it has 220 bridges. Although they are slowly replacing the bridges now. So when we were there, the very last bridge is now a concrete bridge, and there's a few concrete bridges along the way. It used to be pieces of wood, and then when a truck went over it, it was where pieces of wood used to be. So the dodgy ones are now getting replaced.
Well, I always say that the best destinations are at the end of a bad road. And I also love the photographs of people always taking selfies under, the welcome to the Panthera highway and all that sort of stuff. So for me, it's very much part of the journey. And, I just think very much part of a journey to go and see the Pantanal. So tell me, this drive through to the river itself, is there anything happening on there? Or is it literally just getting on into a little vehicle or bus and getting to your hotel on the river?
The way we run our trip, you can go straight down to the end, which is the best place for Jaguars, but we actually don't because you miss so much. So our first night, we actually stop off in the Rio Claro, which is a little skinny, small river. It's about a third of the way in. So it breaks up the drive as well. So instead of driving, say, 7 hours, it's more like you're driving 2.5, and then you're there for a nice afternoon session. And then on our way back, so our last night, we actually stop off at Mato Grosso, which is another way. It's a little bit further in than Rio Claro, but a similar sort of area. And the reason we do that is because there's so many birds in particular along the way that you probably won't see on the boat. You might, but they're not going to be as easy to photograph. And you also have really cool things like giant anteater and ocelot, which you've got a very good chance of photographing in these two destinations.
Nice. Is that the bit in your trip report and the photos that I saw you posted where you had all those beautiful pink flowers in the trees?
Yes. So one of the reasons August is very good is because these pink ipper trees are in full flower. Those flowers, believe it or not, only last about 10 days. And we happened to be there this year when it was perfect. But it doesn't actually happen every year. So the last time the bloom was this good, I think it was in about 2013 or something, and it made the news around the world. And we just happened to be there this year when it was also spectacular.
Sure. Isn't it amazing when those things happen? Yeah, that's what a cool surprise, eh? That's really, really nice. But like you say, certainly not something that you can guarantee, but a nice bonus for that time of the year. Lance, and then tell me, do you head to a specific hotel that you use on the river, or have you considered using a houseboat? I know that those are the two options, either one of the hotels on the bank or a houseboat on the river itself. What are the differences and why have you decided to use a specific one of those options?
Yeah, so this year and next year and the year after, we've actually booked the same hotel. And it's the reason for it is we know it. It's very nice. It's very comfortable. The rooms are basic, but they've got everything you need. The food is amazing and it's big enough for groups. If we have smaller groups or private bookings, sometimes we book the houseboats. The houseboats are a little bit closer to the game viewing area, although in this year it turned out that we had 3 Jaguars to ourselves every time between us and the game viewing area, so that didn't really count. But the main difference is in the hotel, when you've got a little bit of downtime, you can walk around and take photos and there's millions of birds and you're still in the wild taking photos. Whereas on a houseboat, once you're having your downtime, you're in a little cabin. They tend to be much smaller than a hotel room. And some of them, you will get eaten by mosquitoes because the dining areas and things are outside versus inside. So there's good boats, there's bad boats, there's good hotels, there's bad hotels. Where we go and where we have been going is very nice. So yeah, we're sticking to it for the moment. But houseboats are also, if you get it right, they can be very cool.
That makes a lot of sense. So let's talk about the game viewing there. Obviously, once you're out looking for the Jaguars, you are not in a game drive vehicle, you're on a boat. So just explain to us a little bit, what do the boats look like and what does a typical activity look like when you go out?
Yeah, so we can actually let's start with Rio Claro and Mato Grosso. So that's 2 nights of the 10 nights that we're there. So there we actually do go on a game drive, but it's like a big Ford. I don't even know how to explain this thing. It's a truck. It's not a game drive vehicle. It's not like an F-150 or whatever. It is massive. It's a huge big truck. Rows of seats, 2-sided, but Then you drive on this the Trans-Panthera Highway, and then you photograph birds and hopefully giant anteaters. So we've got the option of doing 2 or 4 of those, because we also have the option of doing really cool boat rides at both of those lodges in small boats. These boats fit like 4 people, I'd say comfortably, but some people didn't find it so comfortable. But it's a very shallow river, very small, no flowing water, so it's a different experience. And then the main Jaguars excursions are on a much bigger boat. So the company we use, they've got a whole range of boats, but they vary from, say, 6-seaters, and their biggest one is a 10-seater. So the most amount of guests we take is 8 people. So 8 people in a 10-seater boat, you've got plenty of space to put your stuff. Very comfortable. They've got a roof. We've got a cooler box with ice always. We pack lunches. And it's part of the adventure is going out all day here.
Is that one of those foldable roofs that you can put down early in the morning and late afternoon when it's a little bit cooler and you want to have a little bit better visibility?
So it's actually 2 roofs. They fold up from either side and meet in the middle. Early in the morning and late in the afternoon, we always have it off. But in the middle of the day, it is hot. And just the fact that you're sitting in the sun the whole day. I didn't actually put on sunscreen once this whole trip. I just covered up and we had the roof and I had a buff and I had gloves and things. So I chose to get out of the sun. The roof helps a lot in that. But when we're in a Jaguar sighting, we have to drop the roof. So that's because there's other boats on the river with us. We don't want them to be now sitting behind our roof. But we did have quite a few sightings where we found our own Jaguars and we left the roof on because it was hot.
That makes sense. It's nice to know that that people are considerate like that. So you just mentioned that you do full day outings. I keep wanting to call them safaris. I suppose they are boat safaris. So you do these full day safaris. Yeah. Why do you stay out the whole day? Because I can only imagine that must get quite exhausting considering the sun, instead of coming back and relaxing in camp during the middle of the day.
So the company we use, and now ourselves, we joke because most other boats, most other companies, most other accommodation, they go back for lunch. So they have a morning boat ride, they have an afternoon boat ride, and they miss so much. Jaguars are these weird cats that early in the morning, they're actually doing less when it's cool than when it's really freaking hot in the middle of the day.
Wow.
We saw many attempting to hunt. We saw 2 successful hunts, and those were both right in the middle of the day. And most of the attempted hunts were also in the middle of the day in the heat, because these guys are hunting in water, so they're cool while they're doing their thing. So for us personally, you're going all that way. You're there to get the best photos you can of Jaguars. You want a bit of action because a sleeping cat is a sleeping cat anywhere in the world.
Yeah.
But these cats, when they're active, are incredible, in and out of the water. So if you want that stuff, you have to be on the river. You can't be at home having a fancy lunch.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think in that case, it's all about being comfortable and having the roof and having the drinks and having enough space. At the end of the day, that's what makes it possible. So where do you go to the loo? If someone needs a toilet break in the middle of the day, where can you actually stretch your legs somewhere safely?
So we go to P Island. We joke. So you just climb out. It's like a game drive here in Africa. You need to pee. There's a tree. You go behind the tree. You get back in. Obviously, it's a little bit more exciting in Brazil because you pull up to a bank. There's caiman, which is their version of alligators, all around. And you can't really see what's over the bank until you climb onto a jaguar like our guide did. And then he got such a fright, he told us all to come. And as we all tried to go and see it, he said, "What are you doing? Get back in the boat." So, but yeah, we just pull off to the bank. We find a nice hidden spot and we make use of the bushes.
Well, Lance, let's talk a little bit about the stats. I know a lot of people, when they spend all this money to go to these exotic locations that are often driven by a keystone species or a very charismatic species like Bengal tigers in India, or in this case, jaguars, these gigantic panthers in the Pantanal. What are your chances of actually seeing them? So in other words, during your typical trip, What can people expect? Is it something that's super hard to find, or do you actually see them often have lots of different photographic opportunities?
Yeah, that's actually a great question. So my first time I went to Brazil was in 2019. And believe it or not, even that long ago, what is that, 5 years ago, the area wasn't that well known. It wasn't a wildlife destination like it is today. So the habituation level of the animals there was good, but small amount of animals. Now, the amount of cats that are habituated to boats is just insane. So we had an amazing time in 2019. We were there for, I think, 5 nights, and we had 12 sightings, which is great. It's a good hit rate for one specific species you're going for. This year was a little bit slow. We went for 22 days, and we only had 85 jaguar sightings. So
85?
Yeah.
Whoa!
85.
That's nuts.
So it's absolutely insane. Your bang for buck for going and the amount of images you will come back with, or the amount of opportunities you have. And remember, it's not just jaguars, it's the fanciest birds you've ever seen in your life, and hundreds of different species. There's giant otters, there's tapirs, there's, if you're very lucky like we were this year, there's tyras, there's just, you're almost never in a position where there's not something to take a photo of, which is incredible.
Yeah, I love these places with the extremely high biodiversity, because it just allows you to, I suppose it stimulates you the whole drive, especially if you're out the whole day, to be able to park off somewhere under a tree and just photograph birds, or to spend some time with the otters. It does break it up. And it also means you come back with a much nicer portfolio, a diverse portfolio, as opposed to just photographing the jaguars specifically. Yeah,
so I haven't even counted how many photos I've come back with, and I don't think I've gone through 20% of the images I've taken. I've been quite busy since I've come back, but it is insane the amount of pictures I came back with. So I filled 2 terabyte backup storages, and then I didn't have enough space to back up again. So then I filled up my computer, and I came back with images on my memory card. So
I want to ask you about gear in a second, but first, just something that you mentioned. You were saying that in the last 5 years, obviously, a lot of these cats have become a lot more habituated. But that also tells me that means there must be a lot more boats on the river. So I've seen some of these pictures where there are a lot of boats in the sighting. How well are those sightings controlled? In other words, do the guides give each other sort of reasonable respect? How often are you caught up in those really busy sightings versus finding your own jaguar? Just explain to us a little bit about what it feels like to be on the river with other photographers.
Yeah, so we know obviously Africa very well, and there's places in Africa where it goes a bit tits up vehicle-wise. And we've both been to India. India can be quite busy vehicle-wise as well, and there's a lot of screaming and a lot of yelling and that kind of thing. Brazil, the guides there are, I don't want to say more ethical or more...
considerate.
More considerate than African guides, because that's not the right word, but it's different. There's no... I'm here to get a better spot than you and screw you, and if we're here, you're on your own. Like they take turns. Everyone's very respectful. You'll see when a jaguar's walking down a beach, everyone lines up. So there's a big line of boats, and then when the jaguar walks past you and you've had your turn, you join the start of the queue again. So there's very little squabbling. There's very little time where you even really notice the boats, because also you're so focused on the jaguars when they're doing something that you don't really notice it until we had one sighting this year. It was actually the second group's first sighting of a jaguar, and it was 2 mating. So we pulled in, and there was a lot of boats, I must admit. There must have been about 35, 40 boats in a little end of an estuary, so where the river ends. And everyone just parks off next to each other. So everyone's boats touching, which is actually nice, because nothing's then moving. You're not, there's no waves around you. And then every now and then when you looked around, you were like, oh, okay, the river is quite busy. But most of the sightings when you're out, because there's a lot of accommodation in a lot of the houseboats, the starting points, you never leave as a group. It's always your boat going off on its own. So timing wise, not everyone sees the same sightings. Not everyone's radio talks to every radio, that kind of thing. But it's very well done, very respectful. But it's also, when you get there, you see there's about 11 or 12 or 14 different little river systems in this area. There's 3 main rivers which are located close to all the accommodation. That's kind of like the central area. That area is busy for boats, but that's because there's about 15, 16 Jaguars that are always popping up right there. So a lot of the boats who are only doing a morning or an afternoon because they're going back for lunch, they only do that area. So it can stay quite busy. What we did is we had a couple of really nice days there, got a lot of Jaguar sightings under a belt, and then we left and we went and we found our own Jaguars. Some of our coolest sightings, we were alone because we'd found them ourselves. And then obviously you've always got the backup plan, as if there's nothing there, you can go back to where all the radios are. So
Remind me again of those 85 sightings that you had. How many different Jaguars were there?
So I myself, over the 2 groups, saw 31 different individuals. And I think it was split pretty evenly between the 2 groups.
Yeah. Well, see, that gives you a good idea. The fact that there are so many different individuals also means that your chances of having some of them to yourself also then gets increased. But I suppose, it's always good for people to know that, these safaris can sometimes get a little bit busy, but that us as photographic safari guys, we do exactly what you did, where, you'll get your sightings under the belt and then you'll go and you'll try and look for something that's, not only a great photographic opportunity, but maybe a little bit more of an exclusive experience as well. Coming back to the boat and sort of slowly but surely getting into the photography side, you mentioned that, sometimes when they park next to each other, at least there aren't waves. That was one of my biggest concerns. If I ever were to go, I get quite seasick. So what does it feel like to be on that boat, and how easy or difficult is it to actually stabilize your camera and to keep your food in?
So those are 2 very different things. So I also get quite badly seasick, which is, I mean, me and motion sickness, we're not friends, which is sad because I travel for a living. But on these boats, you never at all feel sick. Kirsten's also worse than me at motion sickness. She can get sick in a bath, and she never felt sick on these boats. It just, when you're moving, it's very stable. When you're sitting still, there's a little bit of movement side to side, but it's only because the boats are very shallow and quite narrow. So if someone stands up in your boat, the boat will move a bit. So you don't feel sick, but keeping a camera stabilized is not easy. I mean, I took hundreds of videos there to put my little trailer together. And a lot of it is really nice, really nice when the image stabilizer kicks in. So yeah, we actually saw the BBC crew there. No, they're not. The Disney crew there. They're filming the March of the Jaguars. It comes out in 2025, I think. It's going to be really cool. I'm hoping we're in it because we were under the drones a few times. You're not allowed drones, by the way. And they had a 10-foot high pole, this big solid steel with a gimbal that probably cost a couple of $1 million. And they use their little remote controls to aim their cameras, and they don't touch them. So if you want to do really seriously cool filming, it's difficult, but it's not impossible. It's really cool.
But luckily, you were not there necessarily to take videos. I know you obviously do it for your trip reports and stuff like that. But I know most people will probably take their videos with their cell phone. It'll be a lot easier. But coming to the stills photography, what's the best way then to combat that movement when you're taking stills? Or did that not really bother you too much, the movement?
Yeah, so stills, it depends on your lens. But I found with stills, it doesn't really interfere too much. Again, it'll depend on the person. If you're not super strong and you've got a really long lens, maybe it'll be a little bit harder. But I took a monopod. Best thing I took was a monopod with a panning head on it. I'll put photos. There's probably photos right here now. So that was a lifesaver. But I actually found in some situations it was easier just to handhold. So I was handholding a 600mm f4 a lot of the times, and because the boat can be moving a little bit, if it's moving in the wrong direction, sometimes a monopod doesn't help, and you can adjust much easier with your arms if you're handholding. So if you have someone who's got like a 100 to 400, a 100 to 500, something like that, it's a little bit lighter, 70 to 200, you will just handhold 90% of the time. If you're taking a 500 prime, a 400 prime, a 600 prime, it's good to have a monopod, purely also because if you've got, say, 6 hours of sightings in a day and you're holding a very heavy lens, you're going to be mugh after the end of it. So, it's good to take a monopod.
If I recall correctly, in your trip report video, again, we'll link to that below, you mentioned that your sort of ideal range was about 500 to 600 mils. Did I understand it correctly that that's because, well, one, you're obviously not getting that close to these animals that are on the bank, but secondly, also, it's not like on a game drive where you are moving between trees and over mountains and through valleys and where you're capturing animals in the environment. Your canvas, for the lack of a better word, is typically kind of more or less the same distance away from you. Is that why you suggested that sort of focal length?
Yeah, so 2019 I took a 500mm prime, and I always felt like I was a little bit too far away. This year I took a 600 prime, and I'd say 80% of the time I felt like I was a little bit too close. So,
wow.
But you do get a very big mix of distances. So we had sightings. I mean, if you've kind of not lost your spot, you've had your turn, you've now lined up again, and you're at the back of the queue of boats, you've still got a very good opportunity to take photos. But that animal might be 100 meters away. She'll end up 20 meters away from you when she's next to you. But sometimes you park very far away because she's walking on a beach over there, or she's in the reeds and you can't really see her, but here's a caiman right next to us and we want to see if she's going to jump on that. So you go park next to this. So you've still got a really nice chance to shoot her the whole way down, but this is kind of where we want her. But yeah, like a 100 to 500 or 100 to 400, those lenses are almost perfect. If there was a 100 to 600, I'd say that would be the best thing. Or a 100 to 500 with a 600 prime.
I'm pretty sure there's going to be a lot of 200 to 600s for the Sony shooters that go through. And, I think Nikon has do they have an 80 to 600 now? Something like that. There's going to be a lot of that sort of range of lenses to go through. Is genuinely perfect.
Yeah. If you're only taking one lens, which I wouldn't recommend, but if you're only taking one, that would be it.
Yeah. Definitely, guys, go and make sure you check out that trip report video that I've mentioned a few times, because right at the beginning, and I think at the end as well, Lance shows a lot of the sightings and especially the photographs that you can get from there that obviously we're not going to be able to do justice to that here on the podcast. So definitely go and check that out. Lance, so let's move on a little bit. Let's just very briefly talk about the birds. You know me, I'm a proper bird nerd. Yeah, just tell us a little bit about the bird life and how close you can get and the variety, and just what does it feel like as a bird watcher and a bird photographer in the hotel, around the hotel, and on the boat as well.
Yeah, so for everyone who knows me, I'm not a bird nerd, but I feel like I am a bird nerd there. So we saw 165 species of birds over the 2 trips. And there's everything from putu, which it looks like a giant piece of bark, or it looks like a bit like a nightjar. So incredibly cryptic bird that disappears in the middle of the day. You're staring at it, you still can't see it. All the way down to tiny little hummingbirds, which are the size of a 5 Rand coin. The bird life is incredible. And because it's hot and tropical, they're all fancy and they're all pretty, and there's very few boring brown ones. Wow. So I must admit I'm a fancy bird snob. If I'm taking a photo, it's normally because the bird is pretty. but everything there is pretty. So we do a couple of mornings where we walk around the lodge. They get the hyacinth macaws, which is a bird that people travel there just to see. So it's a 2-foot blue parrot, which is beautiful. They get the toko toucans. They get the arasaris. Every bird is pretty. So it's very hard. Even if you're not a bird photographer, you're going to take a lot of bird pictures. So there's the walking around the lodges. The first lodge, the last lodge, they have bird feeders. So there's birds always around you. Even the most common bird, like a red-headed cardinal, this big, there's billions of them, but they're very pretty if you've never seen them before. There's owls, there's kingfishers. I think we photographed 5 different species of kingfishers. There's 15 or so species of herons. There's cormorants. Yeah. There's rheas, so the giant emu-looking things. Yeah, so it's growing on me. It's growing on me. Yeah.
To me, that sounds absolutely epic. It sounds epic, and to me, that sounds enough reason to go.
Yeah, if you were only a birder and you didn't really care for cats, you will still have the best time on this safari because there's just so much going on bird-wise.
Wow, unbelievable. Well, listen, the last question that I have is, if you had to, anybody that is actually seriously considering the safari, photo gear aside, what else is important to take with? Is there anything clothes-wise or insect-wise or anything else-wise that, was super handy to have there and that you wouldn't go without?
So obviously your travel adapters and plugs and things like that are always good to take. Insect-wise, this trip and the next 2 years' trips, the insects numbers were very low. So 2012, we went in suicide season, which is when it's starting to rain. It's getting a bit wetter. So there was a lot of mosquitoes. There's a few biting flies. This year, the next year, we're going basically in the middle of their dry season. So very few bugs. You almost don't need to worry about bugs. So that's fine. And then I like the wicking clothing, and I like long sleeves. So purely so you don't have to slather yourself in sunscreen every 10 minutes and have skin exposed. Most people went in singlets though this year, singlets and shorts, and just put sunscreen on all day. I went full long sleeves, gloves, a buff, long pants. It is warm. So there's these really cool stuff that we don't get in this country like now. So like a lot of the Americans and Canadians have these, they look like headphones, but they sit around your neck and they've got a little fan and it blows cold air on your neck.
I like that.
Little stupid gadgets and things like that where it's got nothing to do with photography, but just to make your time more comfortable. That's kind of it. Great. And then your photography gear. Couple of bodies is good. Something like a 70-200, something like a long lens, either 100 to 500 or a prime. A monopod is good. A comfortable backpack, or it can be a hard case because you land off a big international flight, you get on another big plane, then you're in a transfer company the whole way. So there's never any time where you can't have a nice camera bag. It's a lot easier than what a lot of people seem to think.
That is awesome. Well, I'll tell you what, hopefully sooner rather than later, I'll be able to join you on this safari. And if you guys enjoyed that and it sounds like something that you would like, go and check out the link that I've added in the video description. That'll take you to the website where all the trip information, the price, the dates, everything is there. And I know for a fact, am I right in saying, Lance, that a few spots have been taken already? So don't waste any time if you guys want to travel at a very specific time. And I'm sure you also mentioned to me that even if those dates don't suit you, you guys can put a bespoke trip together as well for people.
Yeah, that's right. So as long as we're free and obviously the company we use has got space available, we can go anytime. But we wouldn't recommend the rainy season.
Correct. Well, just pop Lance an email. We'll add the email address in the video description as well. Lance, anything else that you want to add about this that I may have missed, or does that pretty much sum up your Pantanal safaris?
I think that pretty much sums it up. So I know I told you last time we went, the food was dreadful. Because I think a lot more people are traveling now and things are getting more popular as a destination. The food this time was incredible. So awesome, if you're worried about food as well, you can take that worry away because the food was really. I came back and my pants didn't fit. So I had. You know what?
whenever I go to exotic destinations like that, that's always my biggest worry is food and comfort in your room. So it's good to hear that you guys have found a good hotel, a good service provider. Oh, you mentioned something very briefly. I knew that there was something. You mentioned something about the language barrier. Was that a language barrier just when you were in the cities, or was it a language barrier on the boat specifically?
So, one of the reasons we use the company we use there is because all of their guides speak English. Brazil, this part of Brazil is all Portuguese speaking. So if you speak Portuguese, awesome. Then you don't have to worry about it. But a lot of Brazil, there's zero English. So if you walk into a supermarket or whatever and you try and talk to someone, they don't know what you're talking about. So going through the major airports was easy. It's very well signposted. It's very obvious. And you can always find someone who in broken English will talk to you, or we use Google Translate a lot. When you get out to the smaller towns and the more rural areas, English does not exist. So yeah, the reason we go with our company that we use there is because the guides all speak English, and they're not only good boat drivers, they know what you want as a photographer, and they're awesome. So they're very entertaining. They know how to look after you. And yeah, we have the best time with them.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, like I said, I'm going to join you one day. We're going to make it happen. Listen, guys, let's go on to the next thing that I know a lot of you have been looking forward to. And that is basically announcing who won our little trophy for the best photograph taken in Mashatu Game Reserve. And this competition was launched in episode 5. We'll link to that above if you haven't watched it. And for those of you that don't know, Mashatu Game Reserve in Botswana's Tuli Block is one of mine, Lance's favorite places, and one of the best places, if not the best place in Africa to photograph leopards. So just like we did for Mana Pools, where Lance won, in that episode we put up these two photographs, this beautiful wide shot of Lance of a leopard sitting on a log, and this slightly closer shot of a leopard photographed at sunset. That was my photograph, and you guys voted in the comments down below. And Lance, the results were, it took me a whole 5 minutes to count them. You got 20 votes, and I got 41 votes. So finally, I win the trophy for the first time ever. So thank you so much for voting, guys. We really enjoyed it, and I'm so sorry that it took so long to give you the results. And I can finally explain to you why it took so long. Just after we posted the podcast, the MD of Mashatu, Wendy, actually watched it and reached out to us and said she would like to offer us the opportunity to come and do the trophy handover in Mashatu itself. So that was an incredibly kind gesture. So Wendy, thank you so much for that. Unfortunately, though, Lance and I just never found time that we could go together. Isn't that absolutely ridiculous? It gives you a great idea of how much we travel, but we were lucky enough that our wives were invited with as well. And just to get all 4 of us free at the same time was impossible. But what we hope we'll do is next year, and I'll talk a little bit more about next year in season 2, is that we'll go back to Mashatu and maybe record one of our podcasts in Mashatu, just to thank them as well for all the support that they've given us over the years. So, Lance, thank you very much for, losing. It's going to be interesting to see what we decide next. We haven't yet decided what will be our next competition, but maybe the best photograph taken in the Greater Kruger, Sabi
Brazil.
Sands, Timbavati. If it's let's do it, Brazil. Just waiting for that invite. But talking about next year, Lance and I have decided that in season 2, which will launch next year, we're going to try and mix it up a little bit. We'll probably still do a few trip reports and talking about specific places and comparing places like we have here. But we'd love to, one, talk to other wildlife photographers, so do some interviews with our peers, and also do more on-location podcast like we did at the King's Warren Underground Hide in the Timbavati. So let us know in the comments down below if there's any specific other photographers that you'd like us to talk to, because obviously we can just send them an invite and they can join us here on Riverside, which is the software that we use. Or if there's anyone specific that you want us to go and see in the field, or even a place that you'd want us to go and record. At this stage, we're very open to ideas, and maybe if we see something come through a lot, we'll try and make it happen.
Sounds perfect.
And then last So literally the last thing for episode 10, the final episode in this year's or this season's the Safari Shots podcast, is to thank all of you guys. Everybody that have been watching, sharing comments, sharing the videos with your friends, listening on Spotify. We really appreciate it. From my side, from the Safari Expert YouTube channel where we host the podcast, a massive shout out to all my patrons. These are people that make small monthly donations to support my efforts, and it helps me to do it full time. So thank you so much to all of you. And if any of you watching would like to support the channel, go and check out the link that I've added at the video in the video description. Lance, I know you also would like to say something about your patrons for the Panthera Photo Safaris Conservation Fund, and all the great work that they have allowed you to do with their donations.
Yeah, so firstly, I'd just like to thank absolutely everyone who's been a patron of ours over the last couple of years. We've managed to do some absolutely incredible things with the donations that you guys have made. So a very heartfelt thank you from us. And just a couple of examples for anyone who's thinking of joining but doesn't quite know what it's about. So this year alone, I don't know if you heard about the leopard who was attacking people here in Hoedspruit because they kept walking past her dead in sight. So we actually, through our patrons, we sponsored a predator cage. So she was safely captured with her cubs, and she has now been released back in the wild somewhere far away from humans, which is a very awesome case, because the worst case scenario is they're just going to shoot all the leopards, which is very sad when there's a human interaction. So that was our patrons who sponsored that cage. It is a story most people might even know from around Hoedspruit. So that was very cool. And just in the last month alone, we've actually sponsored a couple of pangolin sting operations. So we received a couple of messages. We've got pangolins. We know where they are. We need instant funds to go and rescue these animals. And before we'd even finished reading the text, we'd already sent the funds. They went out and they actually got all 3 of those animals, which is awesome. And that's thanks to our patrons. So yeah, very, very special thank you to you guys, and anyone else who wants to join. Like V says, it's a tiny little monthly donation, but it does so much good. So if you're thinking of joining, please do, and thank you.
Yep, the link to that will be in the video description as well. And again, just to every single person that tuned in, either on Spotify or here on YouTube this year, we appreciate it so, so much. For now, it's over and out from me and Lance, and we will see you in Season 2, Episode 1 of the Safari Shots podcast. Lance, until next time.
Cue outro.
Thank you.